in the heart of the lush, rolling hills of Kwande, a small village bathed in golden sunlight and the soft murmur of the river that coursed through it, lived Amani and Kojo. Their lives were simple, yet bound by an unyielding love that painted their days with joy. Kojo, a humble farmer with broad shoulders and calloused hands, toiled in the fields from sunrise to dusk, sowing seeds with dreams of a brighter future for his beloved Amani. She, with eyes as bright as the morning star and laughter that could awaken the forest birds, spent her days weaving, singing songs that spoke of their love, and tending to the village's communal garden. A few days earlier, King Abina had wandered into the village marketplace, cloaked in plain attire to avoid drawing attention. The vibrant hum of the market filled the air as villagers bartered, laughed, and exchanged goods under the warm sun. Among them, one figure stood out, Amani. She moved with a quiet grace, her radiant smile and sparkling eyes lighting up the marketplace as she greeted each villager by name, laughing with the children and handing out woven goods with a kindness that softened even the weariest faces. King Abina watched from a distance, captivated by her warmth and the genuine ease with which she connected with those around her. As he approached, he straightened, summoning the charm he knew was rarely resisted. He stepped forward, addressing her with a voice he intended to be smooth and commanding. "Good day, fair lady. It's rare to see someone with such grace and generosity toward those around them." Amani looked up, her bright eyes meeting his gaze without a trace of fear or flattery. She bowed respectfully. "Good day to you, sir," she replied politely, her voice soft but steady. "I'm a man accustomed to admiration," the king continued, a slight smile on his lips. "And I must say, yours is a beauty and spirit unlike any I have encountered." His eyes lingered on her, expecting her to respond with a bashful smile or a glimmer of interest, as most would. But Amani's face remained composed, her gaze unwavering. "Thank you for your words," she replied simply, then turned her attention back to an elderly woman at the stall beside her, offering the woman a basket of produce. King Abena felt a strange thrill at her lack of deference, and continued, "Tell me, what is your name? Surely you must know that a woman with such a presence should not be left to walk these markets alone." "Amani, my lord," she replied with a respectful nod, her voice carrying a calm strength. "But I am not alone. My heart belongs to my husband, Kojo, and my life here with him is all I desire." The king blinked, momentarily taken aback by her words. "Kojo," he repeated slowly, feeling a slight irritation prick at his pride. "And who is this Kojo that holds the devotion of one so rare?" "My husband," Amani said, her tone unchanging. "A man who works the fields with the same strength and devotion with which he loves me. He is my heart, my lord." King Abina was silent, his mind turning over her words. For the first time in years, he felt something he could hardly identify, a mix of admiration and envy. Here was a woman who would not sway or flatter, one who held her head high even as she spoke to royalty. She offered no illusions, no facade, no attempt to charm. She was unlike the concubines and even his queen, who, out of fear, rarely revealed their true feelings. Amani's honesty and quiet strength, paired with her loyalty, struck him in a way he could not ignore. As he walked away, her words lingered in his mind, simmering into a decision that stirred a new resolve. He thought to himself, "I must have her. For in her, I have found what I have been denied, a woman who speaks her mind, one who would dare to refuse a king." And so, his heart set, he resolved that Amani would be his, no matter the cost. One evening, as the sky blushed with hues of orange and purple, Kojo sat beside Amani under the old baobab tree. "No matter what challenges come our way, I promise to stand by you, Amani, Kojo said, his voice steady and filled with quiet strength. Amani reached for his hand and smiled. And you, Kojo. Even if the whole world tries to pull us apart, I will be here, waiting. Their tender exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Kojo's brother, Kofi. He approached, breathless from running. Kojo, news has spread that the king's emissaries will visit tomorrow, Kofi said, concern etching lines into his brow. They say taxes are to be raised again. Kojo's jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with worry. We will face it together, brother, he replied, casting a glance at Amani, who nodded in silent agreement, her expression resolute. The next day, King Abina's emissaries, clad in robes of crimson and gold, strode into the village square. The lead herald, a tall man with a sharp gaze, unfurled a scroll. By order of King Abina, taxes on farm produce will increase to ensure the prosperity of the realm, he declared, his voice carrying an edge of finality. The sun seemed to dim as murmurs of dismay rippled through the crowd. How are we to survive with such a burden? An elderly farmer named Adama called out, his voice wavering but fierce. The herald's eyes narrowed. These are the king's orders. Defiance will not be tolerated. Kojo felt Amani's hand squeeze his arm. We will find a way, Kojo, she whispered, determination glistening in her eyes. That evening, the family gathered around a small fire. The scent of roasted yams and herbs filled the air, but an unspoken tension crackled between them. We will manage, said Kojo's mother, Nala, her voice steady with the wisdom of years. We will help one another, as we always have. We cannot let fear consume us, Kofi added, his eyes shifting between the faces around him. If we stand together, we will endure. Despite the hardship, the community banded together, sharing food, stories, and strength. Kojo worked from dawn until his muscles ached, yet he found solace in Amani's songs that drifted through the fields, lifting his spirit. However, in the palace, King Abina's envy burned hotter. My lord, the increased taxes have not weakened their spirit, the king's advisor murmured. Abina's brows knitted as he clenched his jeweled goblet. Then it is time for more direct measures, the king hissed, his eyes cold and calculating. The king's next scheme was more insidious. He summoned one of his most trusted servants. Take this parcel of food to the village, he ordered, a sly smile curling his lips. Ensure it reaches Kojo's family. This time, my will shall be done. The servant obeyed, arriving in Kwande with a parcel wrapped in fine cloth. The king sends his blessings in these difficult times, the servant announced, his tone syrupy but his eyes darting nervously. Look, Amani, Kojo said, wariness flickering across his face as the servant departed. It seems the king has sent us aid. Amani frowned, the unease settling deep in her chest. Kojo, something feels wrong about this. Why would the king help now? We have been without enough food for days, Kojo replied, eyes heavy with exhaustion. But let us be cautious. He broke off a piece and tossed it to a stray dog that lingered nearby. The air grew still as they watched. Moments later, the dog's breathing grew labored, and it collapsed. Amani gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. They swiftly went over to check if the dog was still alive, and gave it some water to help it recover. The king's cruelty knows no bounds, she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. Kojo's expression darkened with rage. We must warn the others. This treachery will not stand. Word spread like wildfire, and the villagers, now united by suspicion and shared hardship, vowed to stand by Kojo. That night, voices of defiance and solidarity rose like a chorus under the starlit sky. Frustrated and desperate, King Abena's final act was to conscript Kojo into the army under the guise of defending the realm against northern raiders. The day of departure was marked by the somber clatter of weapons and the tearful goodbyes of families. Amani clutched Kojo's arm, her voice trembling. "Promise me, Kojo. Promise me you will return." Kojo cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I swear it, Amani. No king, no war will keep me from you." Kofi stepped forward and embraced his brother. "Fight with all your strength, Kojo. We will be here, waiting." The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Amani's hope was a fragile flame she nurtured with every breath. The letters Kojo managed to send were treasures, each one read until the ink began to fade. But as time wore on, those letters became scarcer. One day, a messenger arrived with news that made Amani's heart stop. "The battle was fierce," he said, eyes downcast. "Many have fallen, and Kojo's fate is uncertain." Amani sat by the riverbank that evening, clutching the last letter Kojo had sent. The breeze whispered through the reeds, carrying her quiet sobs. "Kojo, you promised," she whispered into the wind. Whispers of Kojo's death emboldened King Abena. He prepared to claim Amani as his own under the guise of royal protection. His caravan, adorned with banners and guarded by armed soldiers, wound through the village like a serpent. "You will come with me, Amani," the king declared, his gaze cold and possessive as villagers gathered, their faces taut with anger and fear. "I will do no such thing," Amani replied, standing tall despite the tremble in her voice. "I belong to no one but myself." "You have no choice," King Abena said, stepping closer, his shadow casting a long, menacing silhouette. Suddenly, a voice rang out. "The king is mistaken." The crowd turned as if pulled by a single thread. There stood Kojo, battered and weary, but alive, with a handful of survivors at his back. The sun framed him like a halo, casting long shadows that stretched across the gathering. "Kojo!" Amani cried, breaking free of the crowd to throw her arms around him. Their embrace lit a fire of defiance among the villagers, who stepped forward in solidarity. King Abena's face twisted with rage. "You dare defy me?" "Yes," Kojo said, stepping forward with the strength of a man who had endured the storm and emerged unbroken. "You have taken enough from us. No more." His voice was steady, unyielding. The king was frightened by Kojo's confidence and returned to the palace to hatch a new plan to execute Kojo for his defiance. However, his plans failed when Kojo, flanked by villagers and warriors who had grown weary of Abena's tyranny, marched to the palace. Amani stood by his side, her eyes aflame with the righteous fury of a love wronged. The king's court, once resplendent with power, fell silent as the truth unraveled in front of the assembly. Queen Salama herself, who had long felt the emptiness of the king's heart, spoke the final words that sealed his fate. Queen Salama's voice resonated through the grand hall, a voice that had long been silenced by the weight of King Abena's tyranny. "A ruler who devours his own people's joy for the sake of his desire is no king," she declared, her eyes locking onto the crowd with fierce determination. The words lingered in the air, charged with an undeniable power that sent a ripple of whispers through the assembly. The court's silence deepened as the villagers who had gathered outside pushed their way into the hall. They were no longer mere onlookers, but a collective force, driven by the stories of Kojo's courage and Amani's unyielding spirit. The warriors who stood at Kojo's back raised their spears in silent agreement, their faces set with unwavering resolve. Kojo stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of countless hardships and unbreakable resolve. "King Abena, you have ruled not with wisdom, but with greed. Your actions have led only to suffering and division. Today, we reclaim what was stolen from us, our dignity, our peace, and our future. The king's hands shook as he reached for the jeweled goblet on his throne, seeking solace in the symbols of his power. But the room had changed. The court that once stood in fear now glanced at him with eyes that reflected doubt and condemnation. Servants who had once bowed low now stood straight, their loyalty shifting to the side of justice. "Enough!" Queen Salama's voice cut through the growing tension. She stepped down from her place beside the king and stood before the crowd. "Today I stand not as your queen, but as one among you, seeking what is right." She turned to King Abena, her gaze piercing. "You have betrayed your people for the last time." A murmur of agreement rose from the villagers. An elder Adama stepped forward, his voice steady despite his years. "The time has come for a leader who sees strength not as force, but as the unity of his people." With that, the court guards, many of whom had suffered under King Abena's harsh rule, lowered their weapons. They moved to stand beside Kojo and the villagers, a silent declaration that the king's reign was over. Realizing his power had crumbled, King Abena fell to his knees, the jeweled crown slipping from his brow and clattering onto the cold marble floor. His eyes met Kojo's, not with rage, but with a desperate, hollow pleading. Kojo stepped forward but did not gloat. He extended his hand toward Queen Salama and then to the assembly. "Let us rebuild together, not with revenge, but with justice." The crowd erupted in applause, a sound that echoed through the village and into the rolling hills of Kwande. Justice was not served with bloodshed, but with a return to hope and unity. As the sun set, casting its golden glow over the village, Amani stood by Kojo's side, their hands intertwined. The river sang once more, not of sorrow, but of the triumph of love, courage, and a people uniting to reclaim their destiny. King Abena, stripped of power and shunned, was exiled to a distant, barren land. His days were spent haunted by the memories of what he had lost, not just a kingdom, but the respect and kinship of the very people he had sought to dominate. Kojo and Amani, now symbols of resilience and justice, led Kwande into a new era, one where voices were heard, unity was cherished, and no leader could ever again forget that true power lies with the people. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content. Drop your thoughts or questions in the comments section below. We love hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.